Yasher Koach. To both you, Holden and Tess, Yasher Koach for your Torah and Haftorah chanting as well as your words of Torah. Each of you approached Parshat Truma with creativity, drawing out deep lessons from a few chapters of Torah that can seem technical and sometimes dry. Extrapolating from the Torah's description of how to construct a sacred space, Tess, you taught us that building sacredness is about more than just physical needs. As you said, God will meet us in the place where we connect with others, in our everyday lives, with our friends, family, even people we barely know. It's these bonds that form the communities we know today. You reminded us that the building blocks of any community are its values, perhaps even more than its literal bricks and mortar. And Holden, you taught us a similar lesson, even as you pointed to brick and mortar synagogues to prove your point. Your exploration of historical synagogue design drew us to consider what really goes into constructing a synagogue: the attention to detail, the symbolism, and core commitments that any Jewish community require. And as you brought us along the question of what kind of materials are fit for a shul, you landed with a very important teaching, that you don't need expensive materials, you just need expensive actions that mean something, which will create a synagogue that is not based on fanciness, but based on the people that pray and how they pray. Each of you focused on people, which is the undeniable subtext of the Torah text itself. V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti betocham, we read famously in this parsha, make for me a sanctuary that I will dwell within them. Many have observed, and perhaps many of you already know, that the text says betocham, meaning within them, suggesting that even with the physical structure on earth for encountering God, the idea is that God will be within the people. And what follows is an extensive blueprint for what should go inside: an ark, a table, bowls, ladles, jars, and jugs, a menorah. Many of the architectural elements of this very synagogue have their origin in this week's parsha, as you can see here today, and, as you mentioned, Holden, are demonstrated through the images you brought. But very importantly, after announcing that the people should build a mishkan, a tabernacle or sanctuary, the first piece of furniture the text describes, and the one it describes in the most detail, is the aron, the ark. Inside that ark was to be placed the tablets of the law that Moses received directly from God. In Tess's words, the Israelites were a community based around their shared experiences and their relationship with God, inscribed in the tablets of the law. So it makes sense that the tablets were at the very center of the Mishkan. An ark, more than any other item described here, is symbolic of the people's values, the things agreed upon collectively that make us who we are. Inside our ark, behind me, is where we keep the Torah, the text that we pore over and debate, the Constitution that instructs us with laws and guides us to live our best lives. In the case of the Israelites, it gave them punctilious details for how to do pretty much everything. In this parsha we read, Kechol asher ani areh otcha, exactly as I show you, says God, the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of its furnishings. V'chein ta'asu, so shall you make it. Most of the time, the instructions follow that pattern. You shall do X, Y, or Z. But when describing this first item in the list, the aron, the text is written a little differently. Ve'asu aron atzei shitim, and they shall make the ark from acacia wood. These discrepancies in tense and number are easy to miss, but of course they are the obsession of our rabbinic sages. And the 18th century rabbi known as the Or HaChaim insists that this single verbal quirk is telling us quite a lot. He writes, the change in wording from the second person singular to the third person plural is to illustrate that the essence of the Torah can only be fulfilled by Israel as a whole. No single individual can perform all the precepts of the Torah, he says. For instance, a priest cannot fulfill the bestowing of the 24 gifts to the priest, while a non-priest cannot fulfill the positive commandments of the sacrifices. But taken as a whole, the Israelite people can keep the entire gamut of Jewish observances. For this reason, the Torah says, they shall make the ark. In other words, the collective, in its diverse and unwieldy fullness, is not only commanded vis-a-vis the tabernacle, but the diversity of the collective is also necessary to fulfill the Torah itself. Each individual acting according to the integrity of who they are. And without that diversity, it would be impossible for the nation to survive. I think of this idea all the time in Jewish communal life, specifically about the commandments. Many of us feel bad if we don't observe all of the 613 mitzvot like we think we should. Many of us feel like we're bad Jews for not doing more. But there is this idea that it's actually impossible for every Jew to observe all of the Torah's commands. And instead of holding ourselves to that standard, we should focus on the mitzvot we can perform with integrity to who we are, while also upholding the communal structures that allow the entire Torah to be performed. I think of this teaching also as we consider the great debate unfolding about what our country is or should be. That each one of us and every identity we hold is equally essential to the project of America as a functioning democracy. That our unique individual gifts are all necessary for a thriving collective. In his 1945 blessing for our country, the Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan, the intellectual father of Reconstructionist Judaism, asked God to instruct us in the art of living together, of reconciling differences of opinion and averting clashes of interest, of helping one another to achieve a harmonious and abundant life. For Kaplan, the art of living together was at the core of Jewish and American civic life. He viewed democracy as the religion of America, and therefore implored American Jews to inculcate their own communities with a democratic spirit, collectively reconstructing what synagogues could be. Whether or not Reconstructionism dominated American Judaism, we have him to thank for the institution of the bat mitzvah and other ways of being Jewish that fit our American context. Mordechai Kaplan rose to public prominence during the global shift toward authoritarianism in the 1930s and 40s. And he held fast to the notion that Jewish ideas might help the world heal and realize its potential. In the throes of the war, in December 1942, he wrote, "The contribution which Judaism has made and should continue to make to democracy and the American way of life is best summarized in the motto enunciated by the prophet Zechariah, 'Not by might nor by power, but by my spirit.' Not through war or bluster or machismo, not through buildings or glitz or glamour, but through the spirit of the collective will human potential be realized." That is a message eternally worth hearing in the synagogue. And it is a message we probably all need to hear right now. As we read this week of the ways in which that Mishkan needed to be constructed by the people, we also think of the ways in which our democracy, constructed by and for the people, is also in need of tending to by the people. And something as big as protecting American democracy, given the size of the threats to it, can sometimes feel insurmountable. The leadership here at CBE is working hard to figure out over time what we might be able to do as a community. We're speaking to experts and people in the know who can help us shape an ongoing strategy. I want to lift up the efforts of Gail Kaufman and Karen Levenberg, who are leading our CBE democracy team. And I want to encourage us all to sign up for their listserv at democracy@cbebk.org, which sends out emails with action steps to protect democracy in ways big and small. Whether it means showing up at a protest or developing a relationship with our elected officials, there are muscles we can flex right now, even when we feel powerless. As this Shabbat gives way to another week and another month of change, may we ground ourselves in institutions by and for the people, and may we celebrate them. Whether in Jewish life or American civic life, May we push ourselves and guide others to give deeply whatever materials or insight we have to preserve those institutions. And may we feel the presence of a divine spirit that fills a space when the people come together to create it. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.